Okay, it's 2 o'clock on Monday the 20th of December 2021, the last Cabinet of the year. Can I remind everybody that this Cabinet is being live streamed and it will be recorded for posterity. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence, and I know I have one from Councillor Ben Gray. The next item is the minutes of the last meeting. Can I ask anybody if they're prepared to accept them, please, as a true record? I'll formally move. Go on, it's easiest.
And I'll formally second, Leader.
Thank you. Is there anything else on that? No, I think not. In that case, can I also ask for receive any declarations of interest today, please? No, I don't think we have any. Okay, in that case, we will go to item 4, which is the references. And this is a reference from the E&R Scrutiny Committee in relation to Project Zero. It's actually because of a reference from our Cabinet on the 25th of October. It was an update on the progress being made to develop the Council's approach to delivering the Project Zero, which is the Climate Change Challenge Plan, and including any governance and delivery. As you know, the Project Zero and the Climate Change Challenge Plan complemented, not replaces, other statutory plans or duties by setting out the way that we need to go forward in the future to reduce our carbon emissions across the Council. As you also know, a new project board has been set up, which will report back to the reshaping board and ultimately to Cabinet, as well as being scrutinised by scrutiny committees. The teams, I have to say that there's been a lot of work carried out, but it does make reference to the estate teams, which have worked extremely hard in completing the first data return to develop a baseline for the Council's emissions using the Welsh Government's toolkit. Obviously, in order to continue with this, we will have wider engagement with the community, and indeed, this was a engagement with the scrutiny committee. And officers made the presentation, and there were questions which were raised by the committee, which are in the report. But basically, cutting to the chase, what was considered was the scrutiny committee felt that we should have, or they'd like to have further reports, and indeed on a triannular basis, which is fair. So basically, and they've referred this to corporate from Environment and Regeneration and Corporate Performance Scrutiny Committee for their consideration, which is what we did. They've asked whether or not we would have regular updates. Indeed, we will, and if we have an update, then it will come to us and will be forwarded to the scrutiny committees. And the suggestion, I think, is reasonable. We'll have 3 every year. So basically, this is to note the recommendations of the report from scrutiny, and I think Cabinet to recommend that we will indeed have future reports to this committee on a full monthly basis, and that will be then reported to the scrutiny committees in due course. And if there's any comments coming back from them, then clearly they can return it to us too. So I think that's really what we need to do in terms of this report, if everybody's happy. So can I formally move that we note those, but we also agree to have full monthly meeting updates. Okay, I agree?
Yes, I'll formally second, Leader.
Thank you very much. The next item is a reference from corporate performance. And again, this is a report from Cabinet on the 8th of November in relation to the draft Welsh promotion strategy. As I said, it came to Cabinet and it's been included within the agenda for that committee. The head of policy and business transformation presented a report advising of the Welsh language standards, which were standards 145 and 146. And in the report itself, and I'm not going to read it out because he actually highlighted the points that needed to be addressed, and they're covered within the covering report from the scrutiny committee. Also attached to that, indeed to the Cabinet report as well, was an Appendix A, which provided an assessment for the 2017 to 22 promotion strategy and a draft of a new 5-year strategy for 22 to 27 period. The report did sought at the time Cabinet's approval to consult on the document, which is why we're doing this, in order to finalise the 22 to 27 promotion strategy and to inform the development of an action plan to pursue its commitments. As you know, as Cabinet know, Mr. David Thomas, who was an external consultant, had been engaged to undertake the assessment and was present at that meeting. The consultant drew the committee's attention to one of the standards around whether the local authority had increased or maintained its numbers of Welsh speakers. And I'm glad to say that the committee was advised that the Vale had maintained the figure over the years, but noted that pupil figures had increased by 11%, which is good news. It was also noted that an 8-week consultation was to take place with the intention that a further report to be presented to scrutiny in the new year and indeed to Cabinet. There were some considerations taken in the report, but the Cabinet and they recommended that the Cabinet be informed of the outcomes of the committee as part of the process, which I think we will do. There were comments from various people, and they echoed the counselling within the communities and requested further information in respect of English speakers, families who had moved into the area, for example. So there are things that we need to come back to, and clearly they will be looking for further reports to look at the action plan, and that'll be presented to the scrutiny committee in due course. And indeed, that will follow any reports to Cabinet. So in the same way as the last item, this was a report from us to them. They've recommended that they note in essence what the progress so far, but look forward to further updates in the future. And I think basically I agree. We'll note their recommendations and indeed look forward to further updates as the consultation process progresses. Can I formally move that we accept that at this stance?
And I'll formally second.
Thank you very much. Anybody, any comments? No. Next item is agenda item 6, and this is a reference from the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee in relation to the Glamorgan Voluntary Services, GVS, as we all know it, their annual report for 21-22. At that meeting, a representative of GVS presented the report and their activities and their outcomes of the work for the period April 20 to March 2021. And then the report provided information regarding GVS's future plans. In response to some of the queries that were claimed, is that were suggested that it's the biggest piece of learning the GVS as a result of the pandemic has been the biggest piece of learning that GVS has had as a result of the pandemic has been how willing general public are to support their neighbours and the communities. And I'm not actually surprised at that at all, particularly in terms of the fact that, if you remember, we set up the Vale Heroes group and they came forward in their droves in order to help people. So it just shows that people are prepared to help when necessary. One of the comments that he made in GVS said that the GVS had previously hosted an awards evening, specifically recognising the work of the volunteers in Vale Glamorgan, but that had stopped, and it says due to financial implications, and that's an interesting comment. They also commented whether it would be possible to, as part of the staff awards, to also recognise those who did voluntary work, and it might encourage people to come forward. However, initially, ultimately, what they did say was many volunteers who came forward initially during the pandemic had created informal groups, but the majority didn't wish to adopt a formal structure, there being possible funding available to facilitate this, even though there would be some. Now, the recommendation from the scrutiny committee was that we consider as a cabinet establishing a volunteer award evening in order to formally acknowledge and highlight the work of the Vale Glamorgan GVS or volunteers going forward. We do that obviously in terms of staff, and that's right and proper. And in terms of looking forward to see whether or not we can support or help or encourage GVS to actually continue to have an award ceremony, I think that's something we can obviously will consider, and we'll have to consider that in the future. But bearing in mind the fact that we still have the pandemic with us, I think this is something we'll need to consider during the next year or so. Well, from 2022 anyway, and we just acknowledge the fact that we recognise that they didn't have an award ceremony, but obviously we'll be able to talk to GVS to see whether or not they can continue that in the future, and I think that's probably the best way forward. So I would note the comments made, but we would obviously actively talk to GVS to see whether or not they want to start their awards ceremony again in 2022 or whenever it's possible. I think that's probably a fairer way to do it than us do it for them. I think it's something they need to do to themselves. Liz.
Thank you, Lisa. I just wanted to mention about informal groups that sprang up during the pandemic, and I think virtually every town in the Vale had some form of group. Certainly in Penarth, the Helping Hands formed with many hundreds of people supporting their local communities and their neighbours. And I know that what they found is that part of the formal organisation reduced, but actually those relationships of people supporting their communities has remained. And so there are still people shopping for each other, there are still people walking dogs for each other, and there is a greater feeling of community cohesion. That's brilliant. But I do recognise some groups did explore becoming or adopting a more formal structure and have had big difficulties. So I certainly would like to know more about that in the fullness of time, and I think possibly through voluntary sector joint liaison that could be explored a little bit further to help groups become sustainable, if that's what they wish, if that's where they see themselves in the future.
Indeed. So are you happy with the recommendation that we explore it, but obviously with GBS in terms of where we go forward with helping informal or formal groups? I don't see it makes much difference, to be honest. If they still need help, they need help from somewhere. And if they want to continue to have an award ceremony, then there's something we can discuss with them for them to move forward themselves.
Yeah, no, I'm happy with that, leader, and happy to second that recommendation.
Good, thank you. And indeed, perhaps we ought to, at this point, maybe we should put another recommendation in here. And that is actually, I know we've done it before, but we are still in the middle of a pandemic, and to thank all those people who are volunteers and continue to help throughout the county and beyond, helping during the period where people still need support. I think we should congratulate the people, whether they be formal or informal. I don't think it matters. Even if you're only helping the person next door, we still need to say thank you very much. And I think that's reasonable. Is that agreed? Yeah. Yeah, we can add that on. I think it's right and proper. We should do so. Okay, the next item is item 7, which is the corporate parenting panel. It's the minutes of those, and I know there are 2 members here who were present. Councillor Eddie Williams and Councillor Catherine McCaffer. I know Ben was there too, but he's given his apologies today. And I see there were some updates in terms of Foster Wales concerning a video, etc. And they talked about, I think, children looked after as well, and there was a breakdown given in terms of that. I don't know if anybody wants to pick anything up, otherwise for noting really. Catherine, do you want to pick this up, or Eddie? Have any comments to make?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. That would be great if I could just quickly. You've obviously briefly said what the meeting was about, but just from our point of view as councillors, it's really good to see that this panel is functioning so much better than it used to. We've got an awful lot of invested staff and members who sit on that committee, and Foster Wales is really important because up until now there was no central point if you wanted to do any fostering in Wales. We all know that foster carers are in a really short supply, so being able to have this one point of contact for everyone is really important. And I know that we have, I think we've got maybe 1 or 2 more foster families now than we had prior to this. So bearing in mind that, yes, as you said, there is a conversation in relation to number of looked after children increasing, probably not as much as some people thought, but realistically we just need to be able to provide them with safe places to live. So it was really good to see Amy there to explain all about Foster Wales to everybody, and it was really good to see. So that was all I wanted to say, but happy to move the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's good. Okay, and Eddie, I formally second it. Okay, thank you very much, or you can formally second it, whatever it is. Okay, the next item is a report from myself in relation to the draft response to the Welsh Government's consultation on the corporate joint committees, which is the General Wales regulations. It's just taken a while to come into being, and We're having more and more information all the time. But the Local Government and Elections Wales Act created the framework for a constituent mechanism for the regional collaboration between local government, which is namely the corporate joint committees, and it also, the Act provides for the establishment through regulations. Welsh Government has, during the last couple of months, consulting on the introduction of regulations and guidance to accompany the introduction of the CJCs over the last year. This report seeks the Council's response to Appendix A to the latest consultation regarding the regulations. A further consultation will be held in the spring, and that will cover any remaining provision. And obviously there will be further reports to Cabinet. As I said, the regulations created the 4 CJCs, and where ours is within the South East Wales area. The 4 will exercise functions relating to strategic development planning and regional transport planning, and they will also be able to do things to promote the economic well-being of the area. There will also be separate corporate bodies and can employ staff, hold assets and budgets, and undertake specific functions. One of those functions clearly is that an underpinning, really, the fact that it is a separate corporate body, it still has to be a member of the local government family, and I think that's quite important to emphasise. And they should largely be subject to the same powers and duties as a principal council. So in other words, even though it's a separate body, it would act in the same way, and the members would act in the same way as they would if they were in a local authority. We have previously consulted on it, but the subject of this consultation is the continuation of the consultation process, putting in place the framework under which CJCs will operate. The regulations require them to adopt a code of conduct for members and extend the powers to the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales and the adjudication panel for Wales to CJC members of the CJCs themselves. So, as I said, same format in many ways as it is with local authorities. But they also require them to publish their constitution and a constitution guide, as well as containing a number of minor provisions in relation to financial, legal proceedings, records, documents, staffing, etc. So the intention is also to include provision for the overview of scrutiny committees in this third set of general regulations, subject to the outcome of the consultation. The report then does go in and give you the key considerations, and as I said, basically they would be a member of the local government family. They would operate in the same way as a local authority would in many ways. It's relevant that they look towards local government legislation, and I think that what this does really is seeks our views in the next stage of the approach. And if you look at paragraph 2.6 in the report, the chapter 1 comments are sought on the instruments which provide for those items which are covered in 2.6, things like the conduct of members, the power to trade, and that sort of stuff. There's also a chapter 2 which seeks the views in relation to the qualification and disqualification of members and officers of the CJC. So in other words, similar to the local authority. Chapter 3 seeks the views intended approach to the overview and scrutiny committees, again, in many ways like the local government family, and we do in other bodies like the shared regulatory services, if you want, is a good analogy. And chapter 4 seeks the views on proposed amendments to a number of regulations to the code through the draft regulations itself. The response itself is at Appendix A, and the Cabinet is recommended to endorse the draft response. The only thing we do have to do is to issue the urgency procedure as set out in section 1414 of the Constitution, so that we can submit it by the 22nd of December. In terms of the consultation itself, there are a couple of issues, like for example on question 9, is there any legislation, is spelt wrong because it says it, is there any legislation which local authorities rely on when operating commercially which isn't currently provided for in the regulations, and I endorse totally the answer, which talks about the council notes the consideration currently being given around the viability, liability, and otherwise for VAT or corporation tax, as the CJCs currently don't have the exemptions that the principal councillors do in relation to VAT. And I find that amazing, and I hope that Welsh Government will plug that gap very soon, because if we are part of the local government family, that has to be the case. But we highlight and emphasise that, and I think that's right to do too. The other thing is emphasised is in terms of things like the scrutiny committees, because clearly it does talk about scrutiny committees and overview. And there's a comment in here because we have had difficulties with some of those things, particularly in things of the city deal and actually getting them together, so that if they do in fact have an overview, a scrutiny committee, it should be part of the CJCs to provide the scrutiny support for those particular committees. And one of the things it does suggest is that what it can do is have a standard item in some of the scrutiny committees. So in other words, you will have an update on a regular basis as a standard item on the scrutiny committees themselves. And indeed, one of the things that I try to do is to bring the minutes of the city deal, for example, to the cabinet. So the recommendations are there. The consultation document is at Appendix A. So what I'm asking is that we endorse the contents of the report and the draft response, and agree the submission to Welsh Government using the 1414 urgency procedures, if that's okay with you. That's a very long-winded way of talking to a report, but quite frankly, the CJCs are going to be one of the most important things that are going to be dealt with in the future, and it has to be done right. And I think one of the things we have to make sure is that things like VAT and the corporation tax is dealt with, so that we are actually operating as a family within local government parlours, and currently that's not the case. So sorry, I had to get that one in because I'm a bit annoyed about it. I'm going to move those recommendations anyway. So is that agreed with anybody? If anybody got any comments to make?
No, I think, well, I'm happy to formally second, Leader, without comment.
You can follow my rant in that case, because I think we've got it wrong. However, moving on. Next item is item 9 in relation to the nature emergency delivering the council's action plan. This is from Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Education and Regen. Liz, please.
Thank you, Leader. This actually is it's more of an update report and an explanation of how we're going to make it work. Going back to when the nature emergency was declared, we set out what we wanted to do. We wanted to get our own house in order. We wanted to work with others. We wanted to lobby Welsh Government, UK Government to make sure that their policies aligned and were enabling. But it was, how would that work for us? We already at that point had Project Zero, and so in the consultation that was actually reported on the same day as the same council meeting that we declared the nature emergency, we had already sort of reported back on the consultation, the Project Zero consultation, where people had said that they wanted nature to be more explicit within Project Zero rather than just sort of an add-on. So that's what we've done. The local nature, or the nature declaration, or nature emergency declaration, will be taken forward by a local nature action team within the council. They will feed into the Project Zero board to make sure that's all coordinated, and to save a completely separate strand of work being done. It's proposed that the biodiversity forward plan, which was agreed by Cabinet well back in September 2019, along with the related nature recovery action plan, will form the basis of the council's response to the emergency. So in effect, we're taking work that we're already doing, beefing it up, making sure that it can meet the declaration that we made of nature emergency, and feeding that back through Project Zero, so it's all coordinated and it's a cohesive plan. So, you know, if you actually sort of go through the report, first of all, it talks about the nature emergency and how we got there. Then it goes through the nature emergency governance and delivery arrangements, and that's sort of from paragraph 2.7 onwards. In 2.14 and 2.15, it talks about, so how are we going to measure it? And that's quite interesting, because also related to COP26, there are some new measures, etc., that have come out in relation to that. But I think that the one thing I would like to add into this, pointing stuff that's already happening that I'm really, really thrilled about, is the work of the local nature partnership. And that's in the Vale of Glamorgan has already got 84 organisations and groups as members, and that includes some community-based groups. It can be schools, it can be youth clubs, all sorts of people that are out and about doing things actively in their communities. There's also a 3-county meadows group that's been established, so we're working in partnership with Bridgend and Leith Port Talbot, and that's developing links with landowners and looking at how we manage meadows, both for wildlife and also for learning and sharing those techniques. Some people have seen me rabbiting on about the donor meadows, where we've actually got machines that collect seed from meadows within the Vale of Glamorgan, and then with volunteers sort those seeds and resow them elsewhere in the Vale of Glamorgan, so that we support our specific biodiversity in the Vale. And that's been really brilliant. I mean, I know that a donor meadow in Dyffryn House was actually harvested, and that was spread to somewhere. I think it was in Barry, but I'd have to double check on that. So it's already some excellent work ongoing, and now we've got a clear framework for how we'll report. So there are 6 recommendations, but they're not hugely long, so I'll nip through them. That Cabinet approves the governance arrangements to deal with the nature emergency. Secondly, the Cabinet endorses the use of the Biodiversity Forward Plan as the basis of the Council's response to nature emergency, and that can be found on the Council's website under the Biodiversity Forward Plan Part 2. The Cabinet considers the way forward for responding to nature emergency as proposed by the Project Board, as described in the body of this report. The Cabinet notes that the Project Board will ensure alignment with activities undertaken as part of the response to Project Zero. The Cabinet refers this report to Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee for their consideration. And finally, that this report is distributed to all elected members and all clerks of town and community councils for their information, and hopefully that they'll join in as well.
Okay, good. Can I make one change? On the third one, the Cabinet considers, I think we should say the Cabinet endorses the way forward for responding, just to make it formal. Is that okay?
Very definitely, yes. I think that's much better. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just spotted it myself. Okay. You know, there's a lot going on, as you say, and we can only move forward. Is there any comments from anybody? Otherwise, I will formally second it with the change to that we endorse the way forward in terms of that. Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much. The next item is item 10, which is the draft Tenant and Leaseholder Participation Strategy 21 to 26, and again, this is in terms of this is a consultation document more than anything else. Margaret, can I bring you in, please? Cabinet Member for Housing and Building Services.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, and it is a big document, as you'll see. There's lots in it. But the new Tenant and Leaseholder Strategy 2021 to 2024 sets out the Council's vision for increasing tenants and leaseholders to take into everything and talk about everything and participate with everybody and come out with some good solutions really, but I am very keen on this document because they have spoken to tenants and leaseholders in the past, and we have got all their comments, and in there is the equalities impact assessment and including the Welsh language, and I think this will help us move forward. I mean, we just got to work with organisations, especially with the tenants and with the leaseholders, to make sure we're doing the right things and listen to our tenants and leaseholders and act on what they are saying. So there is 3 recommendations, and as I said, you know, it's more just move forward. And so the cabinet notes and improves the details of the new tenant and leaseholders participation strategy 2021-2024 in Appendix A, and the quality impact and assessment in Appendix B for further consultation. That in pursuit of recommendation 1, the strategy and the equality impact assessments are referred to Scrutiny Committee, Homes and Safe Communities for them to take part and have any comments on, and that the subject to the committees 1 and 2, the strategy, the equalities impact assessment and the views of Scrutiny Committee and wider public consultation be considered by the Cabinet prior to the final strategy being agreed, and that'll be in the new year. Thank you. I move those recommendations, and as I say, it's a good report.
Indeed, thank you, Margaret. And as it says in the report, this is the 4th successive tenant participation strategy. So it's something we do on a regular basis, but clearly it has to be updated, and this is part of the update. So I'm happy to second the recommendation and look forward to the report when it comes back to us in its final form, and the review of the consultation itself. Anybody got any comments? Otherwise, we agreed? We agreed. Good, thank you. The next item is a progress update regarding the hybrid solutions for council meetings and public participation and engagement. And I know it talks about the report owner. It is really Councillor Eddie Williams, who is the cabinet member for Democratic Services, Planning and Legal, etc. So Eddie, you want to bring this forward, please?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, this report will be of interest to many. It provides Cabinet with an update on the progress with regard to hybrid meetings in particular. As we know, we're in a different situation than we were several years ago, and it's also to help us progress with regards to public participation and engagement. So this update is about the provision and training for members of a hybrid solution for council meetings, having regard to the requirements of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021 and the Welsh Government's interim statutory guidance on multi-location meetings published in August 2021. It also talks about various aspects relating to other provisions required under the Local Government Elections Wales Act, including the work being undertaken by the Wales Monitoring Officers Group in respect of a model constitution and the work being undertaken internally by council officers relating to a public strategy, a public participation strategy. And it also goes into the work undertaken to date with regard to public engagement in the democratic process. The background in the report talks about the regulations, and clearly they've, there's an expectation that we will have more online meetings and enabling people to participate in a better way. In 2020 meeting regulations, they temporarily relaxed the requirements for rules for local authority meetings during COVID-19. We're all well aware of the COVID-19 pandemic. But the meeting regulations were intended to enable councils to safely continue to discharge their functions during the pandemic, and of course while adhering to public health restrictions. 1.2 goes into the Local Government Elections Wales Act 2021, and these came with taking effect well, some of the requirements would come in effect from 1st May 21, and others are going to come in effect on May 2022. So what were the arrangements before the meeting, before COVID came in? Well, most, as you know, all council meetings were held in person, and some of these were webcast from the council chamber, such as planning and the full council meetings, and these were done on a regular basis via the solution the council's webcast provider, Civico. Some scrutiny committee meetings were also webcast, depending on how significant the topics were, that dependent on public interest and whatever. Paragraphs 140 onwards talk about during COVID-19. So when it came in March 2020, council calendar meetings were suspended, and we ended up using the managing director's use of emergency powers, which enabled the council to continue in its business. And then from July 2020, some meetings of the council, including Cabinet Planning Committee and Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee and Licence Subcommittee, took place on a virtual basis, and these were again recorded and they were uploaded to the council website. Procedures for virtual council meetings were approved under the use of the managing director's coronavirus emergency powers, and these were published on the website as well. From September 2020, the council's calendar meetings was reinstated, and we took all meetings and all meetings were undertaken under a virtual basis, and these were recorded and uploaded onto the council's website. At the time, we were using Microsoft Teams software, and though this satisfied the purpose for undertaking meetings, did not have a dial-in facility, which was obviously a challenge for some members not being able. So we went to Democratic Services, therefore purchased a GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar software licenses, which provided this functionality at the time. Towards the end of 2020, the dial-in function became available, so on the Teams software, and then we were able to continue using that. From May 2021, Section 47 of the Local Government and Wales Act 2021 required that all local authorities must make and publish arrangements for the purpose of ensuring meetings are able to be held by means of any equipment or other facility which enables persons who are not in the same place to attend meetings. Now, this is quite a radical change. I mean, thankfully, obviously, the experience we've learned over the last 18 months, 2 years, we realise how important that can be. So, resulted in the decision to live stream all meetings, hold meetings on a virtual basis. That's what we were able to do under COVID-19. We've then been able to continue the meetings, and they've been undertaken with the Teams software, and they've been uploaded via a media server onto YouTube, and so public and residents and anybody else can view those as they see fit. Unfortunately, that's quite a resource. This resource live streaming method is quite staff resource intensive, so we've looked for these other Civico. We've looked at other options to provide to meet the frameworks that we require. So if you look at paragraphs 2.1 to 2.4, it goes into details about what it's expected. There's guidance on multi-location meetings, that's in 2.1, and it sets out the framework and principles. And although if you look at 2.4, the council agreed to live stream its council meetings from 1st of May 21, there was no real requirement to do so at the time. Section 46 of the Local Government and Environment Act, Wales Act 2021, broadcast meetings does not come in force until May 22. So we've been good in that respect so far. We go to 2.7. The Act then goes into to enable persons not in the same place to attend a meeting. So I think we've been able to do that over the last year or so. But the Teams software, as you're aware, doesn't provide a Welsh language facility at present. So the council's current provider, Civico, they're looking to add that to the as part of the solution that we need on a remote and virtual only basis. Currently, officers within Democratic Services are working with Civico to align the system to meet our requirements, that's Philip Morgan's requirements, by making some design changes. And if you look at 210, it looks at some of those areas that we're actually needing to look at, and including not only being able to be present, but able to vote, and for public to be able to join the meetings and to be included in those meetings, and also importantly to be able to vote. And as we found, that that's quite an important aspect on some of the decisions we're making. So the procurement, if you look at 211, the procurement exercise has been undertaken, contract going to Civico, and so where we stand at the moment is demographic services and ICT officers are going to provide some training and with Civico, and we're going to be doing that in January, February and March 22, and hopefully, well, as with all technology, it's been some challenges to overcome. Thankfully, we're progressing with those. So if you look at 212 onwards, it's some of the issues that we need to actually look at. And interestingly enough, it's widening the scope on councils that can actually join, because not everybody can travel in, and also that meets the agenda that we've got with the environment. We obviously want to reduce carbon footprint, so that's another benefit to this. One of the good aspects that's mentioned in this report is the fact that it will reduce the amount of documentation that we use, so hopefully that will be another aspect that we'll be able to progress with. Yeah, I've mentioned like Project Zero and its climate emergency declaration. We've already done that, and hopefully this will work towards that. As part of the whole process as well, it'll improve the public engagement, because to date it's been a challenge for members of the public to come into. So hopefully the use of the new software will assist that better, and obviously we'll continue live streaming and everything that'll be on the system onto the website, so people can still engage with that. So I've gone on longer than I normally do on a cabinet report, but I think it's important. It's certainly key for all our meetings and engagement, and in widening engagement to the public as well. So on that basis, if you go to the recommendations, that the Cabinet considers and notes the contents of this report, in particular regard to the paragraphs 212 to 16, 216 of the report, and that number 2, the Cabinet notes the Council's remote attendance at meetings procedure is reviewed in light of the Welsh Government statutory interim guidance on multi-location meetings, which was published in August 21, and this will be reported for consideration prior to implementation in May 22. And the Cabinet notes and improves that when further specific guidance is received having regard to Welsh Government social distancing measures and the implementation of Section 46 of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021 and May 2022, a further consideration will be given to which council meetings will be broadcast and held on a physical basis, remote means or both, and a further report will be submitted to Cabinet on the matter. It's important to recognise that not every meeting has to be considered, every meeting has to be hybrid or broadcast. So that's quite important that we still need to consider which council meetings will be broadcast and held on a physical basis. 4, in light of the council's proposals relating to Project Zero and climate emergency declaration, Cabinet is requested to consider that all agendas and reports be provided by electronic means from 1st of January 2022. Less specific requests are made to the Head of Democratic Services for hard copies. And I suppose, although I didn't emphasise it, I did mention that the agendas, etc. reports, we all know that they're hundreds of pages, and it would be better if we, as we do, we learn to move electronically. But I recognise that not everybody's in that space, so therefore, we've got to make it available. But obviously, we're just asking council members and those public that need it to be considerate of the reason why we're doing it. Zero, Project Zero and climate emergency. So the recommendations, Leader, and I so move the report. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Eddie. I think it's important to show where we were, the journey that we had, and where we intend to get to. So clearly that's what this report does, and that we will be using hybrid meetings. So clearly there's going to be times now in the future, because people got used to it, is that people are going to be at remote places and in the chamber, but we're able to accommodate all of that. Catherine, you'd like to come in, please?
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, it was just quickly just to say that I really, it warms my heart to hear this piece of legislation coming through in this report that we're doing, because I really think it's going to help encourage people who may not have wanted to stand for council because they knew they had to be in certain places at certain times, and maybe that was a barrier for them, that it hopefully might bring that barrier down for them a bit. So it might encourage more people who would not have considered to stand to be able to do so now, because if they've got caring obligations or if they have other work obligations at different times of the day, they now know they can still be a councillor without physically having to be concerned about needing anything else that they were having to look after at the same time. So I second this and really welcome it. Thank you.
Good. Yeah. No, I think that's right. If we give as much flexibility as possible, you know, it's something we didn't know in the past, or we didn't consider in the past, but clearly the pandemic has been horrendous, but this is something that's come out of it which is positive. Okay. Yeah, so that's been forwarded and been recommended and seconded. So are we all happy to move on and agree that? Thank you. Good. Thanks very much. The next item is item 12, and this is a report on reshaping of the art service update and Arts Central Gallery review. And again, from the Cabinet Member for Leisure, Arts and Culture, Catherine, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'm really pleased to be bringing this report today. The world has changed considerably from when we started this consultation in so many different ways. The world at large has, locally, it has in relation to the pavilion and what's happened there. All of these things we couldn't predict at the time that we started to do this consultation. How the arts are viewed now has changed considerably as well. I think people finally understand the actual value that art has in people's lives, not fiscal value clearly, but it does make such a difference to people, whatever sort of form art takes for them. So I'm really glad to be able to bring this report today in relation to the reshaping of the arts and Arts Central. So it's been prepared with the options in relation to Arts Service and the Arts Central Gallery, and we've come back with 6 different options, and option 3 being the preferable one of all of them, to establish a cafe bar and modernisation of Arts Central Gallery itself. I'll come back to the recommendations shortly. It is so different. I understand how the pavilion has made such a huge difference to the people of Penarth and other people who've come in to visit it. We've got a really successful set of events going on in there. The open day last Saturday was really successful as well. I was just disappointed I couldn't go because I was at work, but I know that everybody else who did go did find it hugely beneficial. And just to note, we have received some comments from some of our members, both from Councillor Charles and Councillor Johnson. Hello, Councillor Johnson, welcome to Cabinet. Councillor Charles is broadly in agreement with the proposal that we have today, but Councillor Johnson raises some points around option 3 in relation to the impact on the local area. I really look forward to having this conversation when this report comes to scrutiny in the new year, and we can fully discuss all the things that have been mentioned. And we've also received comments from the Chair of the Friends of Arts Central, Dennis Clark, who supports the report in its form at the moment. So the recommendations are that we note the contents of the report in providing an update on options to the reshaping of the Arts and Arts Central following the public consultation, that we approve the options outlined in this report to be referred to learning and culture scrutiny, that subject to the recommendations 1 and 2, Cabinet delegates authority to the Director of Learning and Skills in consultation with the Leader, the Deputy Leader, Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration, Cabinet Member for Leisure, Arts and Culture, and the MD, to continue to engage with stakeholders and interested parties in relation to progressing the preferred option. Report back to Cabinet any material change to the proposals resulting from any response from scrutiny. And the Cabinet receives a report detailing the progress made after the first year of implementation. And I so move this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, especially with your bad throat. So I know you're suffering.
I'm so fed up having a cold, it's just ridiculous. I have natural flow, it's still negative.
Yeah. Yeah. This is fine. It's come back to us. There's obviously the options, and the third option is a preferred option, which will be going forward for the consultation. And as you say, 2 members have made some representations. One of them this afternoon. Councillor Charles Miller this afternoon, and I thought Councillor Johnson earlier, I can't remember what it was now, and obviously Friends of the Earth, not Friends of the Earth, Friends of just Freudian slip, Friends of Art Central has made that too, and they will all be available at scrutiny, and that's the important part to make sure.
Yes, very much
Liz,
so. I would encourage anyone to get involved. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Liz, do you want to come back, please?
Thanks, Lydia. Yes, I mean, I echo what Catherine's said here. I mean, I was fortunate that I was able to go down to the open day in the pavilion, and it was just amazing to see the whole pavilion bustling, and with people that wanted to hear more about all the different things that were going on there, whether that be the cinema or adult community learning, or the types of activities that the library was putting on, or the potential for weddings or events, or maybe the concerts and things that are going on. And I all the times we've been discussing these issues, is there is such a challenge to maintain, promote and run sustainably provision that is outside our statutory remit, because we keep looking at budgets and issues with budgets, and also if you focus purely on grant type funding, then it also means that every time the grant funding is coming towards an end, everybody's attention is taken on chasing the next lot of grants. And what we've been very keen on is actually looking at how we can develop and promote and sustain the arts and community activities in a sustainable way. And you know, we've come up with the preferred option. I think it's very much the right option. The creation of an active, vibrant hub in the centre of Holton Road, the centre of Barry Town Centre, for me, could be a step change in the economic recovery of that area. And I very much, like Catherine, I'm delighted that this is going to be discussed in scrutiny, and you know, we will obviously both be there to discuss this in much more detail. So I'm very, very happy to support this report.
Okay, thank you. As you say, this is going to scrutiny for further consideration, along with any of the representations already made. So we're happy to accept the recommendations as set thus far. Good, thank you. In that case, we will thank you, Catherine. Let's go on to the next item, which is item 13, which is results of the consultation for the Active Travel Network Map 2021 from current member of Neighbourhood Services and Transport, Peter, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, colleagues. This work might be described as work in progress, as things started with the Active Travel Wales Act in 2013 and led to our submitting an initial Active Travel Network map back in November 17. Councils are required to submit updated maps every 3 years, and this is the work towards that. We undertook a 12-week public consultation period between August and October, and gained some 143 responses, and that's led to 3 amendments that I'm bringing to you in this report. The addition of a route to Llantwit Major Beach, the realignment of the St Athan to Roos route, and an additional the addition of a shared use facility in Dingle Park, Penarth. And this report seeks your approval to submit the final active travel maps to Welsh Government. And so the recommendations are that we note the responses of the consultation as attached in Appendix A and B, that Cabinet approves the Vale of Glamorgan Active Travel Network maps as attached at Appendix E. This report is referred to our Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee for consideration in January 2022, and then any comments made by that Scrutiny Committee are reported back to Cabinet for consideration in late January before submission of the final Active Travel Network maps for the Vale of Glamorgan to Welsh Government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. was a big exercise, wasn't it? Absolutely. So this is going to Environment and Regeneration anyway, to be brought back anyway. So again, it's going to have further consideration. Okay, is everybody happy with that? Yes, good. Okay, the next item is any items which are urgent. I don't. So it just leaves me to say, wish everybody a happy Christmas, a peaceful and safe New Year. But I would have to remind everybody that Omicron is very likely to spread if we let our guard down. So please enjoy the festivities in a safe way, and hopefully we will all meet again at another cabinet meeting shortly in January. So can I wish everybody, and can I thank all members of the cabinet, all members of the staff, the work that they carried out during this year and during the pandemic. And I hope they can all have a safe time together with their families. We'll start it again next year. So can I just thank everybody for the work that's been carried out. And at that, I will close the meeting. So the last one of 2021, roll on 2022. Thank you.